Ole, hey, voina brother Mike Japanese province atangin home visit na in heta London aron hall lo maya chuanin ama hi missionary ania missionary kumtam tak Japana no pangani lai khanin Society of Jesus kanti Jesuit Paul Khazoma aron hall lo maya he interview ka nei puidon ni tuna hianin apien le murna te a vocation chanchin te le enge Japan rama enge akhosak dan zong kha voina hianin kan zot don ni chuanin anin enge chanchin kha min thil don ni.
So my name is Mike Milward. My name is Mike Milward. I was born in what is now Pakistan, but then was still India. I was born in a place called Abbottabad. It became well known many years later because bin Laden was killed there. I was born there, but immediately my family left to go to England. We had to wait a while in Pune because the ship did not announce its departure until the day it left. So we had to wait about a month. And we went to England. Later, my father left the British Army and joined the Foreign Office. So as a child, I went from country to country. When I was 7, we went to New York. It was a lovely place by the sea with big gardens. Later, we went to Strasbourg, where my father was trying to get Britain into the European Union. He was very sad when the British government didn't go along with the plan. He would be even sadder now that having spent 20 or 30 years in the European Union, Britain decided to leave. After 2 years in Strasbourg, he was posted to Zagreb. Then it was in Yugoslavia. Now it's the capital of Croatia. But because there was no good school where I could study in English, and the schools teaching in local languages were dominated by communist ideology, I went to school in England, to a Jesuit school. My older brother and my younger brother didn't like the school. They didn't like being away from home. But for me, the school was very good because I got to make friends which I could keep for 5 years. With our traveling up until then, I had to make new friends frequently. Also, among the Jesuits, there were a few who were not very good for work in schools, but there were a number who were excellent. However, after our stay in Yugoslavia, my father was sent to Japan to Osaka, but we had an old house in Kobe, a very pleasant house, but I only went there for the summer holidays. While I was in Japan, I noticed that Japanese people were often wonderful people, but most Japanese people didn't know anything about Jesus Christ. They didn't know anything about Christianity. The name often got a lot of respect, but there was little knowledge. I became curious, and I thought that there were many good things that if I learnt in Japan, I might be able to spread in Europe. Also, I wanted to bring into Japanese culture that essential element of Jesus Christ. I thought it would make Japanese culture much more productive. So when I got back to England, as I was at a Jesuit school, I met the provincial of the Jesuits. And I spoke to him about my interest. And he said, well, look, I'm near the end of my time as provincial. If I accept you into the British province, well, then it was the English province, I cannot promise to send you to Japan. So you should apply to the Japanese province. If it works out, you become a member of the Japanese province. If it doesn't work out, well, the English province would love to have you. The Japanese province realized that for me to do the novitiate and study Japanese at the same time would be very difficult. So I did my novitiate in Britain. 1 year in a very strange house called Harlexton Manor, a huge monstrosity of a house. The drive from the front gate to the front door was completely straight and 1 mile long. So I did my first year there out in the countryside. Then the novitiate, the whole novitiate, moved up to Edinburgh. There the house was small and the part that the novices lived in was new. Not cheaply made, but not very cleverly made either. So I completed my novitiate. When I entered the novitiate, there were about 30 people in my group. Unfortunately, by the time I finished, there were only 11. It was just at the time of the Second Vatican Council, and many people were getting a new understanding of what it was to be a priest, to be a Jesuit, to be a layman. And so a number of them chose to be laymen. In my case, I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a priest, but I felt pretty sure that I wanted to be a Jesuit. So I told this to my novice master, because officially with the Jesuits there is the status of undecided. And he said, well, that is what the books say, but in practice it doesn't work that way. So I will register you as a scholastic. At the end of the novitiate, I went to Japan and for 2 years studied Japanese. It was a good period for me, and there were a number of other people, mostly from Spain and Germany. We studied very hard. Unfortunately, the people who came a year before me nearly all left. Again, part of the Second Vatican Council phenomenon. So people were saying that if they all leave, the next year will be even worse. Well, the people who came half a year before me, they all stayed. And the people who came in my year all stayed. A few died, and one man went back to his country, but the rest stayed. They became priests, and most of them are still working hard. But in Japan, our work is mostly in schools. So I studied Japanese in a suburb of Tokyo, a very pretty suburb. Then I went to another suburb much closer to town, where I studied philosophy and commuted every day into the Jesuit university. When I finished philosophy, there was a problem. All of the other foreign scholastics did their philosophy before coming to Japan. I was finishing my philosophy and I hadn't done Regency. For many, the study of Japanese was their Regency. And I wasn't qualified. I didn't have a degree. So the provincial asked me to go and help one of the professors at the university who had an immense number of classes. So my job was meant to be correcting tests and quizzes and essays, things like that, and also helping with odd jobs. But one day, the head of the English department caught me on the campus and said, "Are you free this afternoon?" And I said, "I have no specific duties, but I have a lot of work to do." So he said, "Oh, that's good. I've got a class this afternoon and I don't have time to teach it. Can you teach it?" And I said, "Me? Can I?" He said, "Of course." So he gave me the textbook, told me what they were discussing in the textbook, gave me the list of students to take attendance, and I went off to the class, and it was very interesting. Of course, after getting the textbook, I had to read it up, because they were discussing a very difficult play, a play called Medea. about a woman who marries the son of a Greek king. And for a while, everything is very happy. They have 2 children. But she is a foreigner. She's not a Greek. And after a while, the king falls in love with a Greek girl and tries to throw his first wife out. And of course, she is very unhappy. And behind this comes the element of ethnic discrimination. The people in Greece don't really like her because she's not Greek. When her husband marries his new wife, she gives her a beautiful dress, but when she wears it, the dress bursts into flames and kills her. But instead of killing her stupid husband, she kills their 2 children. And so we discussed this. And for Japanese people, the discussion is very interesting because in Japanese society, death is very, very important. Sometimes I think it's almost more important than life. And this, I think, is still an important opening for our mission in Japan. Our mission in Japan is to sell life, not death. Especially after all the killing that happened in the Second World War, which is often associated with Christian countries, still our work is getting Japanese people to see the beauty, the sacredness of life. So having taught this one class, I went back to the chair of the department and said, "Oh, that was interesting. Here's your book. Here's a list of students. I've marked them for presents." He said, "Look, I'm going to be busy again next week. Can you take the class next week?" Well, I enjoyed it so much I couldn't say no. And I went back and I taught the course for 20 years. With that, I had to hurry up and graduate. So for 9 months after that, I found myself teaching during the day, teaching a full load without qualifications. And in the evening, I went to night school to get a degree and managed to get my BA degree in 9 months. And I lost 5 kilograms, but it was well worthwhile. After that, I was able to go and study theology. But in the meantime, I had a special feeling. I had a lot of people around my age who were becoming priests. And some of them, I thought, were going to be treading on each other's toes. There were perhaps just a few too many. And I thought that the work that I wanted to do was excellent work for a Jesuit, but not necessarily for a priest. So I spoke with the provincial and said, perhaps it would be best if I became a brother. he had a lot of difficulty with this because he had a rather rigid outlook on things. But when he went to Rome for the training of the new provincial, he found that it was not only possible, but quite easy to make the change. But I said, I want to be a brother, but I want to study theology. I want to study theology in Japan with Japanese people. Theology was only half the problem. I wanted to stay in contact with my fellow theology students. I wanted to stay in contact with the people I was teaching in the university. And this was a decision which I have never regretted. So I became a Jesuit brother and studied theology. After me, the province decided that if a person became a brother and wanted to go into the work of teaching, that they should study at least 2 years theology. And I think that this is a very good decision. We need to understand deeper the religion we are in Japan to encourage people to encounter. So this has been my story until I come to retirement. When I retired, I was appointed to the Jesuit community attached to the university. Once upon a time, it had about 100 people in it. Now we're down to 40. But I was sent there to be minister, sort of house manager. I don't know if you ever watched old British television, but there was a series many years ago, one of the few things on British television which I saw, called Faulty Towers. Everything goes wrong. And that's like my community. And the most important man in the film is called Basil Towers. So once in a while, if an Englishman comes to town, I introduce myself as, I am Basil Towers, alias Mike Milward. So that's my life up to here. If you don't know, Basil Fawlty rather, if you don't know Basil Fawlty, you may be able to find him on internet. It's crazy, it's fun. It's politically very, very improper. But you'll understand the sort of work that I do. In my case, I was in the society to try to get Japanese people to understand who Christ is, why we are so concerned about Christ, and to get them to understand, if possible, that Jesus has something special to say to them. So Jesuits are meant to be a channel of Jesus to other people. But the other side of it is, I always think that when we deal with many of these people, many of them don't know anything more than the name of Jesus. It's remarkable how often in dealing with them, I find a spark of Jesus in them. And when I find that, I like to try to fan the embers, get it to burn, and to do something in their life.
Ropui hle mai tianga in pek na kha aropui ani tuna heta hianin a englo home visit ang chi naron kala London a ule naute aron mudona chuan nak tuk le when are you going back?
I'm going back on Friday.
Zirtop nia tun zirtop tuna hianin Wednesday ania tuna hian nilai thot than nilai ni nia chuan zirtop nia Japana a hole doni chuan kan du sakna sang tak kan hlana thank you very much brother
Not at all, thank you. Kalome.
okay